Pushed for time, we made our way from Sagardunum to Condursum, passing Ponze Aelius for the briefest of moments. In fact, so brief that we didn't even have time to do any filming or take any photos. There again, 1,800 years of development, as well as the construction of a Norman castle on the site, has erased almost all trace of the fort. I said almost. Whilst we don't have a floor or ground plan of the fort, we do know that it was much smaller than the standard fort, and recent discoveries have revealed the foundations of the Principia and Praetoria right next to the Norman castle keep. We also know the granary foundations are in this area here, hidden by the railway viaducts, so at least we know where the three principal buildings are. As well as being exceptionally small, the Principia has no forecourt, and what's more unusual, it's facing the double granary, which is itself in the area of the Praetentura. That's the area between the Praetoria and the front wall of the fort, the area most likely to be attacked and where the fort's best soldiers would have been billeted. The fort was a little over half an hectare in size, roughly 6,400 square metres, and that would have made it somewhere around about 80 metres by 80 metres square. The fort stood back a little way from Hadrian's Wall, the course of which, through this section, I'm unclear about, simply because I've read different accounts. Some say it's north of St. Nicholas's Church, and others place it south of the church. The fort's main purpose was to protect the bridge crossing the Tyne, the partial remains of which were discovered in 1872 during the construction of the swing bridge which exists today. It's believed the length of the bridge was 735 feet, 234 metres, and sat on 10 piers. At modern-day Benwell, very little remains of the fort once known as Condursum, but at least we can still use our imaginations. What still exists are the visible remains of a vallum and gate and a temple. But let's take a look at the fort first. It's believed that some of the defences at Condursum were built by the 2nd Augustan Legion and was probably started somewhere around 124 AD. We're not sure who first garrisoned the fort, but by the 2nd century, Condursum was garrisoned by the 1st cohort, Vangionum Miliaria Equitata, which was a part-mounted unit from Upper Germany. At Condursum, we have some indication of a defensive ditch system, also known as the vallum, which runs parallel and to the south of the wall for much of its length. The area between the wall and the vallum was a clearly defined military zone, a no-go area for civilians. This being the case, the civilian vicus would have been established south of the vallum. However, over time, it did extend further north. The arched gateway was constructed during Hadrian's reign and remained there for the duration of the Roman occupation. But sometime between 193 and 235 AD, during the reign of Emperor Septimus Severus, the vallum was infilled. It was rediscovered in 1932, whereupon its preservation was completed in 1938. The Temple of Antenacitigus was in all probability dedicated to a local Celtic god or goddess. The Romans understood well the power of all gods, spirits and deities, even those of the people they had conquered. Far better to adopt these gods as their own, rather than to make enemies of them and invoke their wrath. We're often led to believe that the ancient Britons were pagans. Well, so were the Romans. Paganism is derived from the Latin word paganus, meaning rustic, country dweller. It's a blanket term which was used to refer to the belief in multiple deities, and a term which only really came into being with the rise of Christianity and the belief in the one God. The beliefs of the Celtic Britons centred in some part on individuals who, through various rituals and means, were able to transcend the world of the living into the world of the dead. Shamanism. And it would be the shaman who would take this perilous journey to seek the help and guidance from the forefathers, the ancients. In turn, the ancients were themselves being guided by the gods who now seemed impotent against the gods of Rome.
Murden. Since time began, your creed have guided us through the circles of wood, earth, stone, and life itself. Well, look you here. Are these not our kinfolk who now lay drenched in their own blood? Put to the sword by the men of Rome, men who talked their gods in ways we are forbid. And yet their gods listen, as ours turn their ears from the words spoken by you to our forefathers. The men of Rome fight like demons of the night, sparing not even the babes which suckled upon their mother's breast. Murden, those now fallen, once called me their king. But what is a king without subjects to command or protect? I ask you, Murden, do our gods tremble in the presence of the gods of Rome? I say they do.
It was time to leave Benwell. We needed to get beyond suburbia to pitch camp for the night, and heading on the wall seemed our best bet. It was late when we arrived, but we did get to enjoy a much needed and deserved pint. It was in the pub where we met a local farmer who gave us permission to pitch camp in one of his fields. I did say one pint, didn't I? We arrived at the field just after midnight, far too tired to pitch the tent, so we simply laid a ground sheet and got straight into our sleeping bags. It seemed morning had arrived the moment my eyes had closed, and with another full day ahead, it was time to break camp. It was only a short walk to Vindabala, the fort located within the modern-day hamlet of Rudchester, and if you didn't know its position, then the chances are you'd walk straight past it. Its layout and construction was similar to that of Condursum, with three of its main gates laying north of the wall. It would have been garrisoned by a mixed cavalry and infantry cohort of about 500 men. The similarity also extended to the Vicus, initially developing south of the Vallum and then extending north and northwest during the reign of Septimus Severus. Before the construction of Vindabala, there existed an ancient causeway which passed down through Marchburn Valley, leading on to a ford crossing the Tyne at Newburn. The wall now forced travellers to pass through checkpoints, as well as being subjected to various tolls and other forms of taxation. It's often overlooked, but these forts had to be largely self-sufficient, to be able to raise funds in order to pay the wages of auxiliary soldiers, as well as being able to maintain the day-to-day operations and upkeep. And at the heart of every fort was the administrative and religious centre known as the Principia. Today, we'd call it the Camp HQ, headquarters. As a general rule, the Principia was sited at the junction of the two principal access routes, the Via Principalis and the Via Praetoria. The Principia consisted of 5 basic areas: a courtyard, a portico, a cross hall, a cecellum, and administration offices. You would have entered the complex through the large main gates into the courtyard. It may well be that the portico was used as an external administration area, as well as for the storage of heavy weaponry. The next set of gates lead us into the cross hall, which, as we can see, is rather long and narrow. Dominating the scene would have been the cecellum, the shrine to the gods and the emperor. It's also where the legion's eagle, standard and battle honours would have resided when not being taken into the field of battle. If a Roman soldier ever doubted who they served, this was their reminder. At either side of the cecellum would have been the administration offices. One of the offices would have been known as the Tabularium Legionis, the pay and records offices of the unit. The Tabularium would also have provided access to another very important part of the Principia, the vaulted strong room, which lay directly beneath the cecellum. This is where the strongbox and other valuables would have been kept. In charge of the Tabularium would have been the Cornicularius, and he would have been assisted by an Actuarius. One point of interest: I refer to this building as the Principia. However, I've also heard it referred to as the Principia and also the Principia.